Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. This is Heidi from My Reading Life, and I'm here today to film my review video for the Book Naturalist Book Club picks for the month of July. So we had two picks for the month of July, and they were Bite by Bite by Aimee Nezhukumatathil. This is Nourishments and Jamborees, which is a collection of essays. And then we also had Soil, the Story of a Black Mother's Garden by Camille T. Dungy. And these books really work well in conversation with each other. So Doris did a great job. She picked, we both wanted to read Bite by Bite, but then she came across Soil. And so when we were deciding on our list for this year, she picked, she thought that these two would go good together for the month of July. And so I think she did a really excellent job because these two books really did. They not only did they complement each other in their themes, but in fact, I think each author referenced the other author in the book. So that was pretty fantastic. It was pretty fun to read these two books one after the other and see those references pointed out. So in Bite by Bite, Aimee Nezhukumatathil, who is the author of A World of Wonders, or World of Wonders, which we read way back in the beginning of the book club. She is talking about food and family and how the intersection of those things has really been important in her life. So I thought that this was a delightful book. I really enjoyed it. It is a lovely object. It has illustrations to start each of the chapters. They're very short essays, and they're in different styles. They include poetry and other fun, interesting formats of writing. So that part was all good. I think that this book in its themes was really important. It talks a lot about how these different items, whether they be fruits, vegetables, herbs, other foodstuffs, natural ways of interacting with different foodstuffs, has really been important and instrumental in her life, in forming relationships with others, in the raising of her family and the development of her own home life. And that's all quite interesting. I think that this falls down a bit in her, she reaches sometimes for her connections. And I felt that sometimes her descriptions went a little bit off the rails. It was a little disjointed in places, and a paragraph, you'd be reading along in a paragraph, and then all of a sudden there'd be a sentence that seemed like it was entirely out of left field, and that would throw me out of the reading experience. So this did not work for me as well as World of Wonders did, but I still found it to be really good and a very charming read, a very gentle read, and a lovely book to pick up in the evening and read 2 or 3 essays and just sort of ruminate on things in the world. So I just want to share with you one little section here, as I like to do, so you can get a glimpse of the author's writing style. So this is in the essay entitled, can't get to the title page here. So this is the watermelon essay, and she is with a friend at a watermelon festival in one of the Midwestern states. I'm not for sure which one, but somewhere in the Midwest. And so she's at this watermelon festival. The line started to snake through the park paths and back up to the refrigerated truck. I worried everyone would only get a tiny wedge, maybe a thin circle slice if we were lucky. Then I noticed one of the caveman dads slicing the elongated melons, not crosswise like you would for pickle chips, but lengthwise like you would for pickle spears. Every single one of us was handed a giant horizontal wedge of watermelon the size of a loaf of bread. When I looked up, I saw hundreds of people face down in watermelon, giggle, dribble, laugh, spitting seeds. It was magnificent. There's really no other word. To see people of all sizes, ages, shapes, and color hauling their giant slices with both hands to their own corner of the park to nibble down with their loved ones. So, just a lovely, enthusiastic way to discuss, a really common thing in the summertime of eating a slice of watermelon, and how messy that is and how much fun it is and how it just evokes like joy and celebration and fun in the summer. So that was really nice. She does address issues relating to being a person of color, writing about environmental issues or natural stuff, the world of nature. And that's also addressed in soil as well. So I thought that was interesting, an interesting connection between the two. Nezhukumatathil, because she comes from a family of, mixed heritages, she has to deal with the question of, what are you, basically, and that how frustrating that is, and how, you don't want to always have to be explaining your origin story, right, to everyone all the time. So she does address those kinds of issues in this book as well. So a good book, but not quite up to the level of World of Wonders, I think, from my own perspective. So then I read Soil by Camille T. Dungy, and this was a brilliant book. This was a 5-star read for me. She knocked it out of the park. This is a memoir where Dungy is exploring the creation of her, basically a garden in her yard. So she and her husband and her daughter, they purchased a house in Fort Collins, Colorado. They are one of very few Black families in this particular town, in this particular neighborhood. Dungy, as is Nezhukumatathil, they're both college professors and they're both poets. And so in both cases, the language is very lyrical in these books. But Dungy is more straightforward, I think, from my perspective, in terms of how she addresses her theme. And her theme really here is of, planting yourself where you are, allowing the good things in the wild to grow, trying not to get in the way of nature as much as you possibly can, and finding all those ways in that she rubs the powers that be the wrong way by her approach to life and her approach to this garden that she's trying to build in her backyard. So she moves into a neighborhood. There are, of course, rules in the neighborhood about how your yard should present itself, how, they don't want it to look too quote unquote wild. It needs to be neat and tidy and all these things. And so immediately Camille and her family bump up against these sort of restrictions, because she is interested in sort of restoring natural flowers and plants into her yard and allowing those plants to do their thing, and in the process allowing other parts of nature to do their things, whether that be birds, rodents, insects, reptiles, the whole works. Like, everybody is welcome in her little patch of land, and how that forces different interactions between her family and the surrounding neighborhood is really interesting, where she finds people who think similarly or who are interested in what she's trying to do and are open to what she's trying to do, and where she bumps up against people who are really afraid of the status quo changing. And in amongst this discussion of her many years on this property and what she's trying to do there by developing sort of a wildland in her backyard, she also discusses barriers that she's encountered as she's tried to develop her career. She's always been interested in writing about the environment, both from a poet's perspective and in other ways, and how she is dismissed or discouraged or not seen as an appropriate person to write about those topics. She really dives into the barriers that women, and in particular women of color, have been facing in terms of writing about nature, how they've not been welcomed in those spaces, that basically the spaces to talk about environmental issues or nature have been, they've been seen as the sole purview of white men for so long, and how hard it is for women, and particularly women of color, to break into that area and to really be accepted, and for their work to be considered, their work to be taken seriously, and also to be celebrated as like really awesome writing and really impressive ways of talking about these issues that we all face in the world, where climate change is the thing that we're all having to deal with, and loss of pollinators and loss of habitat, and the changing way that nature is because of human impacts. And she just writes about that all beautifully. I have marked some places in here that I wanted to share with you so you can get an idea of her writing. Let me see here. Oh yeah, I did mark where she references Nezhukumatathil in her book, so that was really cool to see. Yeah, okay, so she's talking about how hard it is to be a writer and a mom, particularly during the time of the pandemic, and how having her daughter have to come home and do schooling from home, and how that impacted, like she had just won a prestigious fellowship right at the same time, like right before the pandemic started, and she was going to devote a whole year to her writing, and then pandemic hits, her daughter gets sent home from school, now they're homeschooling, or schooling from home, I guess I should say, and how that impacts her writing and the loss that she feels, and her husband being like, hey, we just need to suck it up, like it could be so much worse, like people are dying, like we can't be, thinking selfishly at this point, and her being like, I also need a moment to be selfish, to mourn the loss of this. So anyway, this is from that time period. By the time I got back to the page I started in February 2020, it was September. I loaded and unloaded the washer and dryer in breaks between video conferences and checking on Callie's progress on her remote school assignments. At dinner, Callie panicked because she had forgotten her book report. I stayed up with her until 11 p.m., and she still needed to wake up early if she had any hope of completing and submitting the project on time. Meanwhile, a box of tulip and daffodil bulbs sat on my gardening table with a sheet of instructions urging me to get them into the ground immediately. Oval orbs with roots dangling from the bottom like tiny yellow onions. If given enough time to acclimate to new beds before long winter months prompt their dormancy, these bulbs will grow green stalks and sprout flowers by spring. In the early hours of that bright fall morning, I could sleep or write or garden or clean house or help my daughter, but I couldn't do all or even most of those things. Which needs, which lives, which wills, which words, which stories ought to have priority? These are questions I return to, like I return to these pages about my garden, puzzling over what gets my attention and in which order. I typed as quickly as I could, revising my focus away from the frustrations I penned down in February. I tried instead to describe the hollyhock that finally offered the blooms I'd hoped for all summer. So I think that's just such a lovely little section that really describes the issues that we all face as adults, of like competing demands on our time, and particularly for women and women who have families, the expectation of, she has a full-time job as a professor, and she wants to be a writer, and she is a writer, and she has a daughter who has to be schooled from home, and like that burden falls disproportionately on women. And when you do that, and you just have to juggle, and you have to accept and understand that something's going to get short shift. And in her case, it was, could she continue to develop this garden, or should she focus on her writing? But she didn't have time to do both, and also school her daughter and finish her job, get her job work, her work done for her job, and all that sort of thing. And I just love that. I just resonated with that so strongly. I feel like, as a working woman, my children are grown and out of the house at this point, but still a working mom and grandmother, I totally know what she's talking about there. Like that choice that you have to make between multiple things that you love and what gets priority and precedence. I thought that was a really awesome aspect of this book. So yeah, I just really connected so strongly with this. I think what she's writing about in terms of diversity, and how people of color have been excluded from certain spaces. This goes along with some other topics we've read about in the book club this year, in terms of how Black people have been left out of the environmental movement or been excluded from the environmental movement. And she talks about this in a really practical, down-to-earth, individual kind of way that I think is really important for us to understand. So absolutely love this book. I hope that you will give it a shot. I also will say, beautiful, beautiful object. I just want to point out the end papers for a minute of this book, because they're so, so lovely. So this is her yard plans before, when they moved in, the way it was when they moved into the property. And then, this is what her vision for that yard was. just fabulous, just fabulous. And there's other artwork within the pages of the book. And she talks about the artists that worked on those that she met at a conference somewhere and became her partner in creating those images in the actual hard copy. So that's fabulous. So I absolutely love that we picked Bite by Bite and Soil for our reads in July. I think they were awesome summertime picks for the book club. I think they really work well together, and I hope that you will give them a try if you have not. And then for the month of August, it is Women in Translation Month, so we have picked a book that goes along with that theme, and it is a novel again for the month of August. It is The Last Wild Horses by Maja Lunde, and this is translated from the Norwegian by Diane Oatley. So this is another book in Maja Lunde's, I wouldn't call it a series because the books can be read in any order, but this is another book in her climate fiction group of books that she's been writing. And so this one, again, has a multiple storyline. It has a storyline in St. Petersburg in 1881, a storyline from Mongolia in 1992, and from Norway in 2064. And it is surrounding horses this time, and how each of these timelines has something to do with horses and with climate change. I have loved the previous two books by her that I've read. I think she's really fantastic in writing in this area, and I'm excited to get back to another one of her books, and I'm also excited to read something in translation for Women in Translation Month. So I hope that you will join us for The Last Wild Horses in August. If you were able to read the books for July, let me know down below and let me know what you thought of them, and let me know if you'll be joining us for our reads in August. I look forward to that conversation down below. I hope you're all doing well and finding some great books to read. I will talk to you later.